What's going on, guys? It's Birdie, and I'm back with another video. And today I'm reacting to basically how Europe farms better than the US. Personally, I think that a lot of us Americans think that we have better farming. Like, we're proud of it. You know what I mean? Like, we're kind of known for like being farmers and stuff like that. That's what I would think. So I'm really excited to get into this video and see how Europe actually does farming better. Before we start that video, guys, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a like and comment down below what you guys want to see next. Let's get right into it.
What are these and what's underneath them? I went to Spain to find out. And what I found was a sea of plastic. 150 square miles of it, to be exact. And underneath all of this is something you wouldn't expect.
Gardens, tens of thousands of them. All of these structures are actually greenhouses. This region is roughly half the size of New York City, but it supplies nearly 50% of all of Europe's vegetables. That is an insane amount of veggies for such a tiny place.
This kind of farming looks super different from what I'm used to seeing back home. And trust me, I'm from Nebraska. I know farms.
But these massive US mega farms aren't growing rows and rows of fruits and vegetables. They're typically not even growing plants meant for human consumption. In 2023, the entire United States grew about 1 billion pounds of bell peppers, a decent, respectable amount. But here, just in Almeria, they grew 1.5 billion pounds of bell peppers.
Wow.
How is that even possible? If this tiny area is so crucial to Europe's livelihood, it got me wondering, why isn't America's system more like this?
For sure.
Why are we getting so massively outgrown by a tiny plastic-covered desert in this little corner of Spain? Could it change? And for our own food security, should it change? So I did what we always do here on Business Explains the World. Flew to the source to see it for myself, talk to the people who actually make it happen, and find some answers.
And after all that, one thing became clear. America's farms should look a lot more like this.
I think I'm the last person on this train.
Well, I overshot my train ride by a stop, so now I have to take an Uber. So here we are. It's like hard to even film because the sun is just radiating off the plastics. Half of Europe's vegetables come from this area I'm looking at right now. I feel like Simba and Mufasa looking down.
Oh my.
You know what you want after 30 hours of travel is a vegetable.
Today, we're at one of the tens of thousands of family-owned farms here in Almeria.
This is a third generation greenhouse. It was from my grandparents. So agriculture, let's say, is running
In
through
your
my
blood.
veins,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my blood, you know?
Does this go all the way down there?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is a boatload of
Wow.
peppers.
Standing here, it's hard to believe that this region used to be one of the most barren places on the continent. Almeria is part of the only true desert in Europe. Its big, dry, rugged landscapes were the settings for some of our early spaghetti westerns and big blockbusters. Not what you'd think of as an agricultural mecca, and for a long time, it wasn't. It used to be one of the poorest provinces in Spain, since the arid, windy climate and poor soil made the area basically unfarmable. But that all changed starting in the 1950s, when farmers around here got clever. They started by adding layers of sand and mulch to the soil to give it life, and then added layers of plastic to protect the plants from the harsh conditions.
Plastic, for us, is like a shield.
They found that crops grown underneath this plastic grew far better and were generally safer than crops grown outside of it. Sprinkle in some watering tech advancements, add in some greenhouse engineering techniques, and top it off with joining the European Union so that they can sell produce tariff-free, and you've got this massive greenhouse powerhouse you see here.
That is huge.
Now, there's a lot more to the story of how this place came to be. Decades of transformation at the behest of a dictator, just as a teaser. But we'll put a pin in that for later. For now, I can see why they call this place El Milagro de Almeria, the miracle of Almeria. Today, this tiny area grows between 2.5 and 3.5 million tons of fruits and vegetables every year. There are other places on the European continent that can grow in greenhouses at scale, like in the Netherlands, for example, but no one can really compete with Almeria's 300 plus days of sunlight every year. These greenhouses don't have to burn through heat and energy in the winters like a lot of others do. I mean, it's February right now and it's it's hot. And if you're thinking, but what about summer? Doesn't it get too hot? Don't worry, they figured that out too. When the temperature outside starts climbing into the 90s, farmers paint the outside with white chalk to reflect the sun back out. And scientists have actually found that this has had a cooling effect on the entire region. But to my American eyes, perhaps one of the most interesting things about Almeria is just how many people work here. There are tens of thousands of individual family farms, including Germán's.
Family teamwork, no?
Over the past few decades, farmers around here have shifted away from using pesticides to doing something called integrated pest management.
We don't use harmful chemicals. We use good insects that eat the bad ones. This kind of envelope.
That's full of good bugs?
Yes. They came out and then they start living in the plants.
Oh, bug.
This is the queen, a spontaneous bug, which eats everything.
Spontaneous bugs, so you don't have to import those ones, they just show up?
It's a good signal to have this kind of mites in your greenhouse.
Okay.
That means that your crop is healthy.
So that's the secret sauce for farmers here.
So they got bugs that eat other bugs on their plants to basically protect them. That's crazy.
In Almeria, they sort of combine this like low-tech usage of things like just bugs, preserve your water, cover it with plastic. This means that growing conditions inside here tend to be a lot more consistent and less risky than if the plants were just outside. And all these farmers aren't competing directly with each other. Instead, they pool their crops and their power into cooperatives. This way they have more bargaining power collectively, and they're able to keep supplies consistent and incomes pretty high throughout the year.
They're on top of it.
When I say gas station food, the American audience is not thinking fresh fruits and vegetables from like 50 feet away. So I'm really curious to go see what we can see. Yeah, see Almeria.
Pueblo de Picar,
Wow.
Almeria, España.
Inside of a gas station?
Little Spanish classic for a little road trip snack. So this greenhouse is
I'm not gonna lie, if I try to go get some like fresh fruit or veggies from a gas station here in America where I'm from, it's not gonna be so fresh. It's not gonna taste so good. I would not recommend. So that is crazy that she just walked in there and sees some fresh veggies like that.
system really seems to be working out for Europe. The US, on the other hand, does things a little differently. This is a map of all the farmland in the US. Over here and over here is where we grow our fruits and vegetables. We grow a lot of it, just not enough to feed ourselves. And not because we can't, we just don't. The US is the world's largest importer of fresh fruits and vegetables, a phenomenon that's been on the rise for decades. These days, on average, more than 1/3 of the vegetables consumed in the United States every year are imported. Some crops, like cucumbers, are almost entirely imported. Our most fertile soil is here, and I grew up here, so I know what I'm talking about. But instead of diversified rows of fruits and vegetables like these, our farmland is dedicated to huge monoculture crops. These are crops like corn, wheat, and soybeans. They're called commodity crops because they're not really meant for human consumption. Instead, they're processed into animal feed and biofuels and things like that. And while massive farms stretching for miles might sound great for that specific purpose, they have some serious downsides. Monocultures strip soil of its nutrients, rely heavily on chemical pesticides, and generally leave the plants more exposed to climate shocks and disease. But there's a reason our biggest farms look like that, and Almeria's look like this. It all goes back to how each country responded to a crisis. The US and Spain were no exceptions. Each was reeling from post-World War I societal shifts, economic collapse, and, in Spain's case, a violent civil war that established the Franco dictatorship.
You have placed Spain in my hand, he has told the fascists, and I assure you that my hands will not tremble.
In each country, the government stepped in to shape the future of agriculture. The results, almost 100 years later, could not be more different. First, the US. In the 1930s, the nation's farmers were in a real bind. Encouraged by the government to overproduce during the war, prices crashed in the 1920s.
And all of this was happening right as the Dust Bowl was wreaking havoc on farmland.
A lifetime turned to dust. A way of life ended. By the thousands, they abandoned their homes.
So while the rest of the country got speeded up, farmers suffered. Nearly 1 million of them lost their farms in the first 4 years of the Great Depression. So the government took action. In 1933, FDR passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which later evolved into the Farm Bill.
Things on the farm are not as good as they should be, as good as they ought to be or as good as they will be.
In short, the government gave farmers loans if they grew less crops. Then they bought up the excess and stored it until prices recovered. But only for the big commodity crops we've talked about before. Things like corn, wheat, and also cotton, hogs, and dairy. And it worked. Prices stabilized and farms stayed in business, especially the biggest ones. They were the ones already growing those commodity crops, so they benefited disproportionately from the government's loans. Smaller farmers and sharecroppers got next to nothing. Okay, remember all that. Now, back over to Spain. Spain was reeling in its own way. Post-World War I overproduction, economic depressions, and a violent civil war that led to the establishment of the Franco dictatorship.
El trabajo, estimado como el más ineludible de los deberes, será el único exponente de la voluntad popular.
At this time, Spain's economy relied heavily on agriculture, but not here in Almeria, not yet. For years, there had been ongoing efforts to irrigate this land with water from elsewhere, but most of them failed. And if they didn't fail, they were prohibitively expensive. There was a lot going on here, but basically the Franco regime established something called the National Institute for Colonization to help sort of revitalize and grow the agricultural sector. But their goals for Almeria basically boiled down to two things. One, bring in more people to farm the land, and two, make that first one actually possible by developing new farming and irrigation techniques. While the INC fell far short of its stated goals, this area was nonetheless transformed, with thousands of hectares of new farmable land across about 130 new villages. In 1963, inspired by similar work in the Canary Islands, two INC scientists supercharged progress by wrapping a plot of land in plastic. The idea took off, and so did the productivity and profitability for the area's many, many small farmers. And all these small farmers banded together so that they could sort of stand up against the government. And that was a big contrast to what was happening in the United States. From the 1930s onward, the farm bills just kept propping up these larger farms that were growing commodity crops. As smaller farmers had to give up, the bigger farms got bigger, gained political lobbying power, and expanded their already massive commodity empires with the invention of new synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. So while farmers unified in Almeria, they were fighting each other in the US. Jump to the 1970s, and the US government pivoted towards a free market approach aimed at just making food as cheap as possible for the consumer. What this meant for farmers is that Old MacDonald used to have a farm with chickens and cows and vegetables and oats, to Old MacDonald only grows soybeans or wheat or corn. Pick your monoculture. And with all of that storable product, we started exporting. By 1975, the US accounted for 50% of the world's grain exports. So all of that backstory is why Almeria blossomed into this, and the United States blossomed into that. And the Farm Bill today still very much drives what the U.S. prioritizes in its food system. The law still favors these big commodity crops, like soybeans and wheat, while smaller vegetable and fruit farmers are sort of left on their own to navigate price dips. For example, in 2024, more than $3 billion in subsidies went to corn, and not even corn that people eat. So basically, we import what we want to eat, and we export what we don't. Now, there is substantial fruit and vegetable farming in the US, but there are also real issues plaguing our farms, like growing water scarcity and land loss. So when you look at a place like Almeria, which is so small but maximizes the use of its water and its land to produce all of this, it makes you wonder, shouldn't we, the United States, be able to do the same thing? The answer is kind of. We do have greenhouses, some of which are very large and successful. But ultimately, our system can't really compete with greenhouses in places like the Netherlands, Canada, and Spain. And that's because of money, labor, and centralization. Put simply, in the US, it will always be cheaper just to import from our neighbors. There is no competing with that. If we can expand greenhouses, well, so can Canada and Mexico, and they're gonna do it in a cheaper way. Add to that the issue of labor, which has always been complicated in the US and is especially so now. The hard work of agriculture is mostly done by migrants, but our visa system is super complicated and pretty controversial. And finally, centralization. Greenhouse hubs in the Netherlands, Canada, and here are all built as these very centralized hubs where you have everything you need within a very short distance. The product, education, research, workers, distributors, they're all right here.
Imagine if you're a supplier and you go to a place and all the greenhouses are there, how much easier that makes your job to sell to many customers. And now you're going to set up an office in that area. So sort of it's a chicken and the egg situation.
The US has a lot of catching up to do. And doing that with our entrenched system and our powerful farm lobby will be tricky.
The loudest person with the most money in America gets the change to happen. And that's not the same in other countries.
When talking about change, it might be helpful to look back at a place like the Netherlands and ask, how did they get this system in the first place? It's simply because in World War II, they starved. During the winter of 1944, a Nazi blockade cut off food, triggering a famine that killed 20,000 people and pushed millions more towards the brink of starvation. After that, the Netherlands vowed that nothing like that could ever happen again, so securing their own food supply became a national priority. We see this kind of adaptation throughout history following food shortages. Even in the US, there were victory gardens meant to boost our domestic food supply during and after the World Wars. Urban farming spread across Cuba after a seed blockade left the country stranded. And as recently as COVID, tourism towns in Thailand that lost their income transformed empty plots into community gardens to help feed their neighbors.
We as humans create the most innovation when we face the most extreme and dire circumstances.
And here in Almeria, all of this came about from trying to transform an inhospitable desert during desperate times. There is no perfect farming solution. This model has its own issues, many of which echo problems we have in the US. But we have to figure it out, because there is another existential threat looming. According to the United Nations, by 2050, farmers across the globe need to produce 70% more food than they are right now to feed the population. Add to that, scientists also predict by that time, a lot of our topsoil will be so degraded that it will be basically useless.
Oh my.
We have to take steps towards more controlled environment farming practices. We literally don't have a choice. The next farm bill is expected to pass this year, and it will dictate the food, farming, and conservation practices that the government prioritizes for the next 5 years. Right now, many of the already limited programs for indoor agriculture and greenhouses have been stalled by the Trump administration. Farming policy is often born out of crises. A nation that can't feed itself will die, so it must adapt. Do we just have to wait for another tragedy to strike the United States for us to change how we do things? I, for one, don't want to do that. So if farming policy is responsible for where we are today, maybe farming policy is the only way out.
Wow. It was definitely crazy to see, you know, how they do it in Europe versus like America. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, man. Nonetheless, make sure you guys like that video. Let me know what you guys want me to react to next, and subscribe if you're new, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.